Hello and welcome back to Big Mike Sports, Atlanta-born, Carolina-raised, Detroit-driven. Big Mike with you here, as usual.
The one and only.
And the Big Mike universe was turned on its head this weekend in a kind of cosmic rebound, as every team we've covered so far on the show was completely demolished on Saturday and Sunday. And the one team we've dunked on the most so far, the good old Miami Fighting Hurricanes in the ACC college football universe over there, somehow won after such a two-game slide against two of the teams that we cover here in Georgia Tech and UNC. So good for them, bad for us, as the rest of the other teams absolutely tanked, got absolutely squashed. The Lions, the Tar Heels, the Yellow Jackets, and yeah, probably some other ones that got destroyed too. Oh yeah, App State, they lost as well, so not a good time. We kind of join the Carolina Panthers, who we discussed in the previous episode, down in the dumps. And speaking of that, we have a little fan letter regarding that episode and the whole Panthers thing that they have going on there. They write, watching this team is like watching a maroon ship adrift at sea. Quiet, eerie, hopelessness. It felt like they did everything right this offseason, brought in a star coaching staff, the franchise-defining move to trade for number one pick to get a quarterback that was so desperately needed. It's just sad. There was so much hope and promise. How has none of it translated? There hasn't even been anything to get excited about. I can't even root for the tank since we already had the quarterback and no first-rounder. I feel empty watching this team right now, and I think the organization, they feel the same. If Bryce needs a better supporting cast, then they had no business trading up to number one. We're screwed. But don't worry, guys. Bryce Young had a really good S2 test score, so I'm sure he'll be fine. Those are some pretty rough words for your team, but that's kind of the nice thing about having, teams to root for, is that you can complain about basically anything, and especially when the team's bad, that's when it's a lot of fun, and we know a lot about that here in the Big Mike universe when it comes to rooting for losers. There's kind of charm, too, that it isn't there. But, yeah, with the Panthers, it could, turn around just like it did for Miami college football, as all of our teams are losing right now. So maybe that means that the Panthers will end up winning a game. I mean, we kind of spoke it into existence in the previous episode, going over some scenarios where the Panthers could win a couple of games, even down this kind of three-game stretch that they have coming off the bye week. Still not the end of the world for the Panthers. It just kind of feels that way right now, with them being winless so far. Still a lot of the season to go. We're not even halfway through the season. So, and we'll kind of talk about, in regards to some of these other teams, how the season's not yet over as well. But, yeah, great start to the show, talking about losers. No better time.
To this day!
Now, when it comes to our teams losing this weekend, look no further than the biggest losers of the weekend. Our Detroit Lions, as they went into Baltimore to face a tough, gritty, just nasty Ravens team. I kind of went the whole season really chalking this one up as a loss for the Lions, especially considering the win streak that they've been on this part of the season, winning all those games on the road by double digits. It was only a matter of time before it kind of came back to bite them. Maybe they got too cocky and didn't think that they needed to prepare as fully. I mean, who knows what the reason really is, but basically they just had this one coming because Baltimore is really trying to get their season on track. They had some pretty impressive wins, pretty huge win against the Browns and stuff like that. But then they also had some losses and kind of some close games against some, well, let's just say mediocre teams. And they just kind of needed to get the ball rolling again and really show what they were made of. And they did in this game at home. That Ravens defense all over the Lions offense. This Ravens defense might be the best in the NFL. I mean, that rushing defense is really good. The passing defense, good as well. But the number one thing is the sacks that the Ravens defense is able to get there. Leading the NFL in sacks, and Goff felt it on Sunday, getting taken down 5 times in the backfield. And he felt some pressure throughout the entire game as well. Made it really difficult for them to do anything. Of course, the Lions had 2 3-and-outs while the Ravens scored 2 touchdowns. So it was already 14-0 before the Lions even got a first down in the game. And then by the time it was 28-0 at halftime, the game was pretty much over. Something interesting that neither me or some of our correspondents have ever seen before Once it was 28-0, and Detroit had a 4th-and-goal shot that almost scored a touchdown, but ended up failing. Once the Ravens got the ball back and started kneeling it to close out the half, Fox turned off the game to go to a more competitive game in that Falcons game. So, yeah, really nobody wanted to see what the Lions were putting out on the field. It was that bad. The defensive coverage looked confused, a lot of miscommunications, misassignments, leaving receivers wide open. I mean, maybe they were playing scared and thinking too hard, knowing what Lamar Jackson could do, and, kind of thinking instead of reacting sort of thing. I don't know. There was something that just did not really mesh with the defense, to say the least, giving up all those wide open receptions. A lot of explosive plays for the Ravens as well. There's just no stopping them. It was a clinic in terms of offense. And, give a lot of credit to Lamar Jackson. He was standing back there in the pocket instead of giving up on plays and running around. And with the Lions pass rush being the way it was last week, the Lions pass rush has had its moments at certain points over the course of the season, but has not been consistent. And it really showed in this game. No sacks, not a whole lot of pressure, really. And they gave up 21-27, 357 yards through the air, 13.2 yards per attempt for Lamar Jackson, and 3 touchdowns. That's good for a 95 total QBR. That might be one of the best total QBR performances of the season. So, yeah, just it looked like Lions defense of old, like, last year. This game was a very Panthers-esque game. And honestly, this might have even been worse than that Panthers game was last year. Of course, there was a lot more riding on that Panthers game last year. And in garbage time, they were able to put up a few more points in that game than this game, only being able to put up the 1 touchdown in the 4th quarter. But hats off to Jahmyr Gibbs for scoring his first career NFL touchdown. He had a nice little breakout game, even though the team got completely trounced. Individually, Gibbs had a very nice performance. He looked really good, catching balls out of the backfield, and on that touchdown run, sprinting right through a hole untouched for, I don't know exactly how long it was, maybe 10 or 15 yards, something like that. But really reassuring stuff from Jahmyr Gibbs. 27 fantasy points in that game for him finally, after putting up about 9.5 points per game in the previous games that he played in. And yeah, this is, they turned the game off at halftime. It was that sort of game. Definitely not one that you want to get too worked up over. Luckily, the kind of notion around the Lions fans is that, this is just one game. This is going to happen at certain points over the course of the season to any team. We always like to harp on the Cowboys having that embarrassing loss against the Cardinals, and other teams, having kind of weird losses like that. I mean, the Commanders just lost to the Giants yesterday as well. So this is just one of those games where you get embarrassed, but you just got to recover from it and kind of use it as fuel for the next one. A lot of people, including myself, saying that we feel a little bad for the Raiders having to come in to prime time, coming off of their own loss and their own questions. If we can get our Lions guys who were injured in this game, a lot of really key injuries, a lot of late inactives, such as Jerry Jacobs, a starting corner opposite Cam Sutton. If we can get a few of those guys back, Brian Branch, I was really hoping he would be able to play in this game. Not that it really mattered. I'm kind of glad that none of those guys ended up playing in this game, with it not being very competitive at all. Kind of like, a little rest game. Of course, you want to be competitive in every game, but I have no problem with those guys not playing in this game if it means that a good portion of them will be healthy for that Raiders game. So it might get pretty ugly on Monday night next week. We can only hope so. But you can't get too down on this. This is still a good team, still a very competitive team. They were missing some key pieces last week. Those pieces will end up returning at some point over the course of the season. And if they can use this as fuel, like, I said in my first honest reaction to this game, is that every now and then you need to get your teeth kicked in just to wake up, not get too cocky, not too full of yourself. And, with the national media kind of singing the praise of the Lions, claiming that they might be, the best team in the NFC or perhaps one of the best teams in the NFL, this definitely needed, a little crashing down to earth type game here. So I think that's all that this was. It'll definitely help them for the future. Like I've said, for that Seahawks game, those kind of necessary evils, those kind of necessary losses that you need to kind of work on some things. You're not going to win every game. They could still very well win 13 games or 12 games or something like that. There are going to be a few losses on the way, of course, in surprising fashion sometimes, as we saw in this game. But yeah, this was just one that the Ravens wanted more, needed more. And this is one where the Lions got caught napping a little bit. There were games like this last year with the 26-0 Patriots loss and a pretty bad loss to the Cowboys as well. But yeah, if they can stay competitive in all but one or two more games this season, that bodes pretty well for them. So not a whole lot of concern in terms of the season, but never easy to swallow a loss like this. But the Raiders, a pretty soft team. Of course, every team's gonna give you their best shot. Blah blah blah. You can't look over anybody, but yeah, just the hunger should be there for this next week and in the preparation as well. So yeah, really looking forward to this team coming back to prime time where they performed very well this season and at the end of last year as well. So don't count the team out just yet. We still believe in them.
I cannot tell you, it's confidential.
And hey, how about we pile it on a little bit for our Miami fan viewers?
Nice shot!
Yeah, it was. I don't know what to say about this Dolphins game. I mean, it was close for a good portion of the game up until the very end when the Eagles kind of pulled away. Yeah, I guess it was just kind of inconsistency on Miami's part. Waddle got knocked out of the game for a little bit. Some of our Miami correspondents saying that while they don't want to be the blame the refs guy, it was kind of an oddly officiated game. Apparently there were either 0 calls on the Eagles or maybe there was 1. But needless to say, not a whole lot of penalties called on the Eagles, but several called on the Dolphins. So kind of an odd game there. I mean, of course, you could say that maybe Miami was just kind of unfocused or a little undisciplined in this one. I guess they just really struggled to move the ball. I mean, with that running game of theirs, that's pretty good. That never really got going, especially in the first half with Mostert, the monster of Miami. Raheem Mostert going for a -8 yards in that first half. Of course, he recovered a little bit in the second half, finishing the game with 45 yards rushing. But yeah, I guess the Miami offense was just out of sync for a lot of the game. Of course, Tyreek Hill got his receptions, 11 catches for 88 yards and a touchdown. But he never really got the big one or anything. I guess it was mostly just kind of shorter stuff, not really able to uncork the deep bomb. And of course, on the one play towards the end of the game where Tua was going for the end zone, it ended up getting thrown into double coverage and getting picked off. So, yeah, I guess just an off game for that Miami offense. Of course, the Eagles' defense is very good. And Miami had their chances. The Eagles with 2 turnovers to Miami's 1. So they lost the turnover battle and still ended up winning the game on the strength of their time possession, yards, and first downs. Just being able to control the ball like the Eagles can. That's what makes them a really difficult team to beat. So yeah, 36 minutes of possession for the Eagles, the 26 first downs, 355 total yards to Miami's 244. Yeah, just a tough game, but you're playing one of the best teams in the NFL on the road. You kept it tight for a good portion of the game. So it's not one that you can be too super upset about. Of course, it does still beg the question whether Miami is for real because their strength of schedule has not been very good. And the 2 losses that they have been against, the best competition that they face. So it's just a question of whether they'll be able to maybe get at least one good quality win before you head into the playoffs because, especially in those AFC playoffs, they are leading the division for now. We'll see whether that continues, whether, the Miami could go on one of their little runs of doing pretty badly to end the season and the Bills could, turn up at the end of the season as well. It's still going to be between those 2 teams. Miami with that 1-game lead on Buffalo. Buffalo is such a mercurial team. They beat up on the Dolphins on the strength of their defense, but then they turn around and they lose these really weird games like they did against the Giants here. So I don't really know what to think about either one of those teams. It'll be interesting to see what happens when they end up playing again with some pretty big division ramifications. But yeah, you can't be too sour on the Dolphins here. It's a really tough matchup, but maybe you want to see a little bit more. I mean, like I said, it is a difficult opponent, difficult defense. But yeah, still a lot of questions for Miami and the Dolphins. That offense kind of, meeting some of its match against these 2 defenses, the Bills and the Eagles. Wonder if maybe other teams might be able to start figuring out the Dolphins' offense that has been so just electric in the first part of the season. made them Super Bowl favorites 4 weeks in. Now it's kind of starting to fade a little bit. We'll see if they can turn around and get their season back rolling strong. It's a team that you got to have a lot of faith in because they got that good offense, and their defense, it's been spotty sometimes, but we're still waiting to see them really pull it together because, as we know, Fangio is supposedly, allegedly, a really good coordinator, and he's got some pieces on defense. Jalen Ramsey will come back at some point. So, yeah, can't lose all hope for this team. Kind of like the Lions situation, except at least this one was a little closer. But you can't say that the Dolphins are necessarily better than the Lions right now, because the Lions do have a couple quality wins in there somewhere. And the Dolphins, well, we've kind of yet to see it. So we'll see what happens over the rest of the season, where the two teams kind of end up. They could end up being kind of similar if the Dolphins can have the offense that they've shown that they have in some of these past games. Same kind of goes for the Lions, whether their offense can keep going after sputtering a little bit perhaps the last few weeks. So yeah, two teams that are kind of in interestingly similar situations, kind of running along each other. So yeah, good. Can't panic yet.
Perhaps.
And last but not least, we have this game
That's terrible.
with the North Carolina Tar Heels falling at home to the previously one-win Virginia Cavaliers, now 2-5 on the season. I guess they were looking past this game. It's kind of weird they have a trap game at home, but you can lose to anybody if you kind of look past them, especially this Virginia team. They are a pretty feisty team. When Virginia went up 14-0 in the first quarter, I went on record saying I don't think that Virginia can hang with them the entire game. There's got to be a way for UNC to pull away as the game progresses, because when a team goes up 14-0 really early, it's not necessarily the end of the world. The momentum could switch, and the team that went up a lot early could fade away into the night, but that did not happen in this game. The reason that I thought it might was because I watched a lot of that Virginia-NC State game, where Virginia had a really good shot at knocking off the Wolfpack, but they kind of blew it for themselves at the very end. I really thought that Virginia was going to win that game when I was watching the whole thing, but they somehow managed to blow that one. I figured the same thing would happen in this case. But no, everything just kind of fell right into Virginia's favor. As I tuned in at halftime and kind of looked at the stats, I was like, how is UNC even losing this game? Because Virginia did not have a whole lot of yards. UNC had a lot more yards than they did, but UVA was up by a lot. Apparently, it was some really bad punting, kind of field position scenarios that put Virginia in really good situations to, really short fields to score. So that doesn't help when a lot of that is favoring the team that you're playing if you're UNC. And I guess it was just kind of a sloppy game from UNC. At first glance, Drake May's stats are pretty good. 347 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. Did throw 1 interception, 7.2 yards per attempt. But when you look at the completion percentage, he only completed 50% of his passes, 24 of 48. So, you got to be able to hit your receivers, And Tez Walker with 11 catches, 146 yards and a touchdown. A couple other receivers had some, decent receiving lines, not world beaters or anything like that. Bryson Nesbitt, the long bomb catcher, 3 catches, 93 yards on the touchdown. And J.J. Jones doing a little bit of work underneath, 5 receptions for 45 yards. And then Omarion Hampton had a pretty good day on the ground as well. He didn't end up scoring a touchdown. But, UNC got plenty of yards. I guess they just weren't able to put it in the end zone as much as they had to. And, yeah, Virginia, they did what they had to do, I guess. Mike Collins had those 3 rushing touchdowns. So, yeah, when you get up to the red zone and you're just able to hand it off to that guy and he punched it in every time, that's going to make you super competitive. Yeah, I don't know what else you can really say about this game other than the fact that UNC just kind of blew it like they tend to do each and every year. Kind of going back to the last episode where we talked about UNC's playoff chances, our Chapel Hill correspondent's putting it at 10% and saying that this team needed Jesus to take the wheel. Well, Jesus was not at home. He left the Tar Heels to just stay asleep at the wheel, and they ended up crashing into a lamppost. So yeah, not the way you wanted to end. Well, not end the season. The season's not over yet, although maybe your playoff chances have ended. You still have a chance to get a berth into the ACC championship game, where you could knock off Florida State and perhaps still punch a ticket into the playoff. Um, yeah, but you don't want to have to play with fate like that. You definitely would have rather won this game and kept the streak going, so that you didn't have to depend on these workings and other teams to do certain things and beat certain teams. It just gets into a big mess where you're like playing what ifs. There's still a good team. They can still win out and get into that ACC championship game, and perhaps give Florida State some trouble, as Florida State has shown some weaknesses earlier in the season against some teams that you could consider to be lesser than North Carolina. But yeah, it's just more of the same. It doesn't seem like UNC can ever really put together a really, dominant season. It's always got to be a loss like this. Maybe they'll make it to the Orange Bowl again and have a sort of consolation win or something like that. Who knows? Who knows? But a lot of people were upset at this one. Obviously, not the team you want to lose to. But when you look over a team that's scrappy like this and is desperate for a win, I mean, this Virginia program really trying to come back from almost nothing after their season got suspended last year under those terrible, terrible circumstances. So yeah, great moral victory for Virginia. It'll definitely help them to recruit and build that program back up a little bit. But yeah, just embarrassing for UNC. You try and do so much, to try and put together a season behind your quarterback who's going to get drafted in probably the top 5 or something like that. You want to go out strong to finish his career, but what can you do? You can only keep moving forward and try and win the games that are up next. Definitely not what you wanted to see, but it's what happened, unfortunately. As with all the other teams that played this weekend, who we cover and root for, embarrassing loss for UNC.
You what?
And we're not even going to mention that Georgia Tech lost to Boston College in ugly, ugly fashion.
That's nasty.
When I looked at the score after the game had already ended, I thought, oh, hadn't they already played Bowling Green? It is a similar score to that game. Seems like a similar result. I don't know. Georgia Tech just lets other teams just run right by them. Like, as soon as they run into any sort of adversity, they just completely crumble, and the other team completely runs away with the game. So I don't know what we can say about that. Georgia Tech is really topsy-turvy, but they do play North Carolina next. North Carolina, coming off that embarrassing loss, always has trouble against Georgia Tech. It could be a really interesting game on Saturday between those teams. I'm pretty sure that game is in Atlanta as well. So we'll see which team wants to bounce back the most when those teams come together. Should be an exciting game nonetheless. Although there have been a couple times where UNC just completely blew out Georgia Tech in recent years, so that could just happen again if Georgia Tech just wants to roll over once more. But yeah, that's what we're looking forward to this weekend, along with some of the other games that we'll get into in episodes throughout the week. So stay tuned, and thanks for watching, and thanks for checking out our episode in our first new episode in the new studio. It's going to look even better in the coming days. So yeah, stick around and find out.